Good morning and welcome back, everyone, to the second session on day two of the Jomba MASIHAMBISANE Dialogues. It's been an exciting 2 days already. We had a lovely day yesterday and a gorgeous session this morning. Today's theme is non-normative worlding, and we continue with the exploration of that with this discussion with Kwanele, Finch, Thusi, specifically focused on the question of bodies and borders. Kwanele will present short video work, and then we'll enter into discussion about that work immediately afterwards, both between him and I, and then obviously, hopefully, people in the room will have things to offer as well. It's with great pleasure that I introduce Kwanele Finch Thusi, homeboy from KZN. Kwanele Finch Thusi is a Johannesburg-based multidisciplinary artist, choreographer, designer, and educator. So he's a multi-hyphenate, already crossing borders in terms of the multiple places where he's located, whose work bridges fashion, dance, and storytelling to empower African and queer identities. His choreography for Netflix's Jiva reached audiences in 195 countries, where he served as head choreographer and story developer. He's also a casting director, as well as a performer. Thusi's performances and workshops have spanned Sweden, Mozambique, Ghana, Kenya, and Namibia, and focus primarily on themes of African queer identity and the diaspora. Thusi is also the author of Psychology of a Post-Pandemic Mind and Man Escaped, which also explore healing, identity, and the human body. Welcome, Finch. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good to see you after so long, Mbongeni.
Has been entirely too long. I see you on stage, but very seldom do we get to hang out socially because I live in the Republic of Cape Town, which feels very, very close, but worlds away at the same time, which I guess is part of the thing that we're going to be discussing today. Finch, can you tell us a bit about the work that we're going to watch just now? Just about, where it came from, what ideas kind of animated it. Give us a bit of context, then we'll watch the video, and then we'll sink our teeth into the meat of the issue.
Yeah, okay. So also good morning to your viewers. The work that you're about to see is called Over the Border. It is a brand new work. It's a dance duet, physical dance, contemporary dance duet, which I began investigating, I think, last year, but only was it this year that it premiered at the Ichotra Map Connection Festival that happened at Wits Theatre this March. I think it was March or February. And I had danced with a lovely dancer, talented dancer, artist, Usimpiwe Nkosi, who, he's been working in all parts of, Johannesburg dance with MID, with Vuyani Dance Company. And now he's just on a tour. He just literally recently came back from, I think it was Dubai. I'm not sure. But when I first approached him, he really wanted to know what this over the border means. And for me, I wanted to create a dance that talks about the issues of the border within ourselves, the borders within ourselves, the borders that exist in our immediate space, our physical space, the borders that we create, psychologically also. And then as an umbrella to then talk about immigration and moving from one space to another, and moving from one identity to another.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kwanele. I'm really excited to kind of surface those themes and talk a bit more about those. So I think without wasting too much time, we've got a 45-minute session today. So it's quite leisurely. We've got plenty of space to kind of get all of these things done. Let's move to the video. Wesley, if you could please get us going. Thank you.
सूचत कर कृष्ण को सूचत कर पांच पांडवों ये समस्त राज है मेरा, कृष्ण मेरी मदद करे। कैसे भूल सकूं मुझे लज्जत करते हुए मुझको सुन मेरी माँ, सुन मेरी माँ, सुन। कैसे भूलूं चौपड़ हार के कैसे भूलूं। सुन मेरी माँ, सुन मेरी माँ, सुन। पांडवों के हार चौपड़ में है हार ही हार। सुन मेरी माँ, सुन मेरी माँ, सुन मेरी माँ, सुन। सकूं मुझे लज्जत करते हुए उनको सुन सुन मेरी माँ सुन सुन मेरी माँ सुन मेरी माँ सुन मेरी माँ सुन मेरी माँ सुन
Sure. Wowee. Thank you so much, Finch. Exciting work as always. Yeah,
Thank
incredibly
you.
clean and simple, but layered at the same time. I wonder if you can start us off by telling us a bit more about the work itself, what you hoped it would do,
Yeah.
and kind of turn our attention back to this question that we're seized with today, which is this relationship between bodies and borders, but also specifically this kind of core question of dancing and dance making as a practice of worlding. I'm really interested in teasing apart how for you this work gives expression to these kinds of themes that we're working with now, but specifically engages for you this kind of non-normative worlding, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I think before I answer your question, I do want to stress the fact that two things. The first one is that this work for me is still a work in progress, meaning that I feel like it deserves a second part. So I'm seeing this, what you've just seen, as part one of Over the Border. And then what we're working on right now with the Simpiwe is the part two, which then connects these two worlds together. Number two of what I wanted to stress before I answer your question is we literally rehearsed that work in one day. We met in the morning, 10 a.m. By 12, we had an idea of how we're going to piece it together. The next following day, we went and performed. A lot of people found it absolutely moving and emotive because of the themes and what the piece Over the Border for me and what it signifies is, when I grew up in a predominantly Indian environment in KZN, Tegwini, Natal, Bombay streets. And so growing up as an Indian Krishna conscious devotee, walking into a high school classroom, and I had, like a tilak, so they call it tilak, and I was vegetarian and I did mantras. And going back to Ekaya, which is in Sobantu, which is a very traditional Zulu context, I found myself in the border. I found myself not knowing, am I African enough? Am I Black enough? Am I Indian now? Which now you would understand why I used the music. And so I grew up listening and also kind of playing the tabla, um, and going to, class. My classes were not Zulu classes, unfortunately. My classes were in Urdu. I was learning Urdu at a very young age. I used to write backwards. My dance classes also were not Zulu, Isatamiya, or Zulu Segagidwa. No, it was literally Indian classical Bharatanatyam. And so when I met Simpiwe, he had a very alternative upbringing where he mostly grew up in a very predominantly traditional Zulu background and context. And so I was interested to see how do these two primarily Black men or Black performers exist or coexist in a space in terms of sharing and intersharing their journeys, their history, their past, but also their present moment. And when we talk about over the border, it's just not over the border in terms of, our relationship to colonialism and migration and identity, but also I think the spaces in between us, the borders in between us. Even till this day, I struggle a lot to be in a context where, in a traditional Zulu context, where they ask, but your English is it's over the border. Ofan njengathi, you ofan njengathi, and why is that? And for me, it's a learned experience, it's a learned experience, and so as Usimpiwe also. And so if you had, if you, we can take the whole day to talk about the semiotics of the entire work. But for me, primarily, what I was looking at is the body language of Finch and the movement language of Simpiwe, which is very different. You'll notice that Finch uses, most of the time, his legs are crossed. He uses more upper body. And with Simpiwe, it's more stomping and it's more in the ground kind of movements. And so when you see the interchange or them meeting for the first time, it's that conversation of who are you and what is this in between us? So the stage actually, it was very difficult because I wanted a stage that had red strings all over, but it was very difficult for the Wits theatre technical team. But we're hoping for the next festival to start when the audience walks in, they walk into a web of these red strings. Uh,
Mm.
and
There's
then that also, it's the border between the performer and the spectator is when do we ever break that? It's quite interesting also when you see the end. A lot of people were saying, it was so emotional and they were crying. And I remember doing the rehearsal with him. I also felt a little bit underwater. I felt as if, when you talk about migrants going across on a little boat or being stuck in fish nets, or being stuck in, I don't know, or being shot every single day and trying to hide,
mm.
or being choked to death. I felt those moments, and I wanted to use that, but I don't want to leave the audience like that, which is why we're trying to do a second version of a second part, which then becomes a 1 hour piece.
Nice. So I mean, it's quite evident that like you, I guess your kind of biographical life, which is located in multiple different cultural spaces, linguistic spaces. You as a person experience yourself at the intersection of multiple different possibilities. And in some ways, the work attempts to reflect that reality, right? Um, but what I find really interesting is that the work is clearly citation in that it's drawing on specific movement vocabularies, as you pointed out, including your training in Bharatanatyam and Kathakali, but also Simpire's own kind of body language that he brings to it, right? So in that conversation between those two things, there's an attempt to represent at least the possibility for your complicated orientation towards Zuluness, towards your own Blackness, to meet Simpire's as a representation perhaps of a more normative image of that. But what I find really interesting is that when I look at the two bodies on stage with each other in that pas de deux section, is that visually you're both incredibly muscular, fit young men, right? And there's a history of Black masculinity being framed in perhaps a hypersexualized way, but an overdetermination or an overreading of Black men's bodies as simultaneously objects of desire, but also of aversion. So to see those two very muscular, perhaps stereotypically Black bodies, Black male bodies, then kind of turn to this often very delicate, intimate kind of tenderness with each other, that is not valenced as a kind of sexual intimacy or a tenderness to kind of achieve proximity sexually to each other, but just about holding one another and holding space for one another, is really, really powerful in the context of this discourse around who we are as Black people and who we are as Black men. And formally, the work, as a dance work, we often resist wanting to kind of name what we are attempting to do in the work, because I think it was Isadora Duncan who famously archly responded when she was asked to explain a dance work. She said, well, if I could have talked about it, I wouldn't have danced it, right? So there's also a kind of reading practice as audiences that we bring to dance works. On the one hand, I'm seeing and I'm experiencing, and I'm trying to interpret or make sense of the dance work relative to my own world. So as an audience member, it calls on me as well to kind of engage in a conceptual border crossing, crossing from a space of intellectualizing and thinking in words to what you as a dance maker and as a dance practitioner do, which is think through and speak through the body.
Mm.
How have you found dance making to help you push back? against these expectations, I guess, that the world obviously has of you as a Black man from KwaZulu-Natal at that.
Mm.
And to kind of engage in a way of to engage in dialogue that
Yeah.
opens up the possibilities for how we might see ourselves rather
Yeah.
than locking us down to those stereotypical kind of images of what
Yeah.
Black masculinity is and should be.
I think, to answer that question, I think firstly, I wanted to, when I was creating this work, and I think most of the work that I'm creating will always, for me, come from a very personal space, a very immediate and very realistic space in time of now, in terms of I always want to share a message about myself and share a message that also resonates with another person. Um, I've always seen, what you were talking about in terms of these two bodies, masculine bodies on stage. Um, and I've always, now looking at the video now, I see how messy some parts of the dance connection of the dance duet was. And I love that. I love the fact that it was messy because you see two black men, human black men on stage. Let's start there. And it's not going to be pretty all the time. It may try to be pretty, but it's always going to be two black men touching each other on stage. And I've wanted, and it was very specific for me. Hey,
Can I ask quickly, when you say messy, what do you mean? Because I'm interested
messy in
in
terms of
exactly that tension.
it wasn't a dance contemporary contact improvisation. One person moves and another person goes and the leg it was it had that capability of cleaning the dance work. But and now that I see it again, I think I enjoy the fact that you had Usimpiwe try lift me up. That was improvised, actually. He was never supposed to lift me up. And so he's lifting me up, and I could feel him, really like really trying to lift me up, which is in a dancing world, it's like, oh, why do you have that? You're supposed to look very pretty and nice and light because you're dancing, but that's not the point. The point of the dance or of the work is the message behind these two black men navigating this myriad of identities within a very complex web of other micro and macro personalities and identities who are forming, who are developing who they are, who are understanding and identifying who they are within that moment in space and time. And what I'm seeing now, just to answer your question, is I always try to um, kind of present the body, firstly, or the male body, as power, as resistance, and as resilience. Being a very openly gay man, with my partner going into, I find it very interesting that as much as a lot of people might I've had it before where conversations, it's like, but why don't you have like a very queer dance work with a very stereotypical queer cast? And etching on the themes and on the very stereotypical topics of queer lives, which for me I'm not against, but I always try to use my work as not just a resistance, but as a resistance to the stereotype that has been, given onto bodies and to given onto me. And so even with colonization, Western imperialism, all of what we've learned has been pre-learned, right? And so if we are to move within or towards a non-normative wordling, then we've got to rearrange or not even leave what we know behind, but to regenerate a new world where bodies are bodies on stage and
Mm.
not bodies which are just male and another male and there's sexual or no, or there's a queer body, but you don't stereotype that person to be, oh, it's a queer person and therefore I'm expecting to watch a queer performance. And I
Mm.
think that's where I'm moving towards in terms of my work, is that we need to move into new meanings of performance, and new ways of seeing and new ways of being and performing on stage that are not just performance for performance sake. So you're not just writing a proposal because you want to tick the boxes of the themes, but you want to create that new dimension.
You want something
Just
generative,
yeah,
yeah, that adds to rather than simply reifies or stabilizes what we already know. I
correct.
think that's what I
Yes.
find exciting about what you pointed out, and I want to kind of sit with this for just a little bit longer, is the power and potential of failure, right? So you've said that you kind of composed the work over a very short period,
Yeah.
and then were performing it, and that it remains somewhat improvisational, and that there are always these moments where something new can emerge in the thing.
Yes.
And again, in terms of thinking about, the border as a concept, and
Mm,
standing at that threshold between one thing and another,
mm,
that openness of the work to failing. And by failing, I mean for it to not necessarily play out exactly the way that you'd planned it. For
mm.
me, actually is where we see the cracks
Yeah.
opening up rather, where we can begin to imagine and invest in another possibility entirely that
Mm,
we perhaps didn't necessarily anticipate, but
mm,
that makes possible, right?
mm,
Um, our capacity to imagine something else. I think
mm.
that's beautiful and really, really powerful. Um,
I mean, Mbongeni, for me, it's also the lived experience, which is very important for me, for myself as an artist, is I would have done a very easy thing of getting a person who has gone through, for an artist who has gone through over the border and migration. But I wanted to fetch that story within myself first, walking
because
into
it's
a
already
classroom
there.
and sorry?
I think the point is because it's already there.
Yes,
And that's
yes,
what you kind of draw our attention to at the beginning. And
correct.
your
Yeah,
concept for the book is that borders aren't just physical spaces, but they
yeah.
exist with the psychological. They operate in conception in multiple different ways.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I think that intervention in blackness, and even in the kind of politics of queerness and the kind
Correct.
of bodies that become normatively queer, again, is
Mm,
a really interesting kind of place to be working at
mm,
the intersection of multiple things, right? That reproduce and stabilize these other kinds of borders that may not be
mm.
immediately visible to us. We have 2 minutes left in this session,
Whoa.
because we could just keep going on and on and on and on. I wanted to just check in if there was anybody who had anything that they wanted to offer or any comments or
That was so quick.
kind of close us off. It really, really was fast.
Mm.
Um, I don't see anything in the chat at the moment. Yeah. But yeah, so I think what this particular video work, or well, dance work in video form kind of helped to surface was exactly what you have pointed out and we've sat with at the very end now, which is um, there's this expectation that you present yourself and you appear in the world in a particular
Yeah.
way, both as a human, but also as an artist and multi-hyphenate practitioner of many things.
Mm.
But what dancing and experiencing, and sorry, what creating dance that's built around your own experience and the worlds you come from does,
Mm.
it helps us to produce other possibilities, um,
Mm.
to move beyond, yeah, these seemingly fixed homogeneous spaces and really make space for a multiplicity of possibilities. Um,
I mean, we could go on and on. I mean, it's such a very important topic. Oh my goodness, like it's a very important topic. I mean, we can go to race, we can go to gender, we can go to systemization. But I honestly, I just want to take away what I'm taking away from me is, the borders that we carry. It's the borders that we carry in each and every single one of us, whether they are given to us and passed down to us through education, through economy, through entertainment, through
And
the
word.
media, through education. Everything has been passed on. And so we are constantly eating all of that, and once you vomit it out, then it becomes rage, it becomes hatred, it becomes race, it becomes, you don't look like me, you don't speak like me, then you're not me. So therefore you are foreign.
Mm. Yeah. Thank you so
And
much.
yeah, so
Thank you so much, Finch. Yeah, this invitation to remake these borders again and again and again, and leaning into the practice of dance making because of its
yeah,
embodiment, right, is a really powerful one. And I thank you for your offering today.
thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mbo.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a 15-minute break, and then we'll be returning at 12:15 for the next session, choreographies of a climate crisis. Please do come back in and join us for that. Thank you so much, and thank you again, Finch.